When we talk about the stealth bomber that shocked the Kremlin, we're not talking about a single explosion, a single radar screen, or a single night in history. We're talking about a revolution in warfare. We're talking about the moment when technology, strategy, and daring came together to prove that air superiority was no longer just about speed or firepower. It was about invisibility. It was about dominance without warning. And at the center of that transformation stood the Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit. At the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union invested enormous resources into layered air defense systems. Radar networks stretched across thousands of miles. Surface-to-air missile batteries stood ready. Interceptors were on constant alert. The Kremlin believed its skies were shielded by a steel curtain of technology. To penetrate that shield seemed impossible. To fly through it undetected seemed like science fiction. But American engineers and strategists were thinking differently. Instead of building a bomber that could outrun missiles like the Lockheed State Route 71 Blackbird, they asked a far more radical question. What if the enemy never saw the aircraft at all? The answer was stealth. The B-2 Spirit did not rely on brute speed. It relied on physics. Its flying wing design reduced radar cross-section to a fraction of traditional bombers. Its smooth, curved surfaces deflected radar waves away from their source. Its engines were buried within the airframe to reduce infrared signatures. Its materials absorbed electromagnetic energy. Everything about it was built around one principle: don't be detected. And that principle changed everything. For Soviet planners, air defense calculations depended on detection times. They relied on radar returns to calculate trajectory, speed, altitude. From that information, they launched interceptors or missiles. But what happens when radar returns are so faint they look like background noise? What happens when by the time you detect something, it's already too late? That was the shock. The B-2 could take off in the continental United States, refuel midair multiple times, and strike targets across the globe without forward bases. This global reach meant that no location was truly safe. Geography was no longer protection. Distance was no longer defense. Oceans, mountains, and borders lost strategic meaning. Imagine being inside the Kremlin's Defense Command Center. Imagine screens filled with data, operators scanning for anomalies, confident in the superiority of their systems. Then imagine learning that an aircraft designed specifically to bypass those systems could already be overhead before alarms even sounded. That psychological impact was enormous. The B-2 was more than an aircraft. It was a statement. It told adversaries that American innovation could leapfrog entire defense doctrines. It proved that superiority did not always mean larger numbers or louder engines. Sometimes superiority meant silence. And when the B-2 finally demonstrated its operational capability in the 1990s, during missions over heavily defended territories, it validated decades of research. In the Kosovo War, B-2 bombers flew directly from the United States to Europe, conducted precision strikes, and returned home. They destroyed high-value targets with remarkable accuracy. Despite flying through some of the densest air defense environments in the world, they completed missions without being shot down. That success wasn't luck. It was design. The aircraft could carry both conventional and nuclear payloads. It could deploy precision-guided munitions that struck within meters of their targets. It could operate at high altitudes, beyond the reach of many defenses, yet remain virtually invisible to radar. But the real brilliance lay in its integration into a broader strategic doctrine. The B-2 was not meant to carpet bomb cities. It was built for surgical strikes against critical infrastructure, command centers, communication hubs, hardened bunkers. By targeting the brain of an adversary's military network, it could paralyze response capabilities in the opening hours of a conflict. In other words, it could end wars before they escalated. For Soviet analysts, and later Russian strategists, the existence of the B-2 forced a rethinking of air defense philosophy. Billions invested in radar systems could be undermined by shaping and material science. Surface-to-air missile systems designed to lock onto targets struggled against minimal radar signatures. Even advanced fighters require detection to intercept, and stealth removed detection from the equation. The shock was not just tactical, it was strategic. The mere presence of stealth bombers in the U.S. arsenal acted as a deterrent. It introduced uncertainty into every defensive calculation. If you cannot guarantee detection, you cannot guarantee protection. If you cannot guarantee protection, you cannot plan with confidence. Confidence is the foundation of military doctrine. The B-2 attacked that foundation directly. Critics often point to its cost. Yes, the B-2 was expensive, one of the most expensive aircraft ever built. But when measured against the strategic advantage it delivered, the investment represented more than hardware. It represented technological dominance. It represented decades of aerospace leadership. It represented a message to the world. American air power had entered a new era. And the story does not end there. The legacy of the B-2 continues in modern stealth platforms. Aircraft like the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor and the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II expanded stealth into air superiority and multi-role missions. Most recently, the unveiling of the Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider demonstrates that the stealth bomber concept is not only alive, it is evolving. But it was the B-2 spirit that proved the concept at a strategic level. Picture the first time foreign intelligence analysts saw clear images of its flying wing silhouette. No tal, no vertical stable luces. A shape that looked almost alien compared to conventional aircraft. It wasn't just different, it was disruptive. It symbolized a leap forward that competitors had not anticipated. And that is why it shocked the Kremlin. Because it exposed a gap between visible defense and invisible offense, a gap between expectation and reality, a gap between Cold War doctrine and 21st century warfare. Stealth technology turned the battlefield into a chessboard where one side could move pieces unseen. It allowed planners to think in terms of first strike precision, decapitation strategies, and rapid dominance. It reduced the need for overwhelming numbers by increasing the value of each sortie. One B-2, properly armed and deployed, could accomplish what once required dozens of conventional bombers with fighter escorts and electronic warfare support. That reduction in operational complexity translated into efficiency, survivability, and success. And success is what defines military history. The B-2 has flown missions across continents. It has demonstrated endurance measured not in hours, but in days. Its crews endure marathon flights that test human limits, supported by aerial refueling tankers that extend its reach indefinitely. Each mission reinforces the same message: stealth works. It works because it shifts the advantage from reaction to initiative. It works because it denies the enemy information. And in modern warfare, information is everything. In the end, the stealth bomber that shocked the Kremlin was not just about one aircraft. It was about vision. It was about daring to build something critics called impossible. It was about engineers who trusted mathematics over tradition. It was about strategists who understood that the next war would not be won by who had the biggest radar, but by who could disappear. The B-2 spirit did more than penetrate airspace. It penetrated assumptions. It proved that dominance does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and by the time the whisper is heard, the mission is already complete. And yet, beyond the technology, beyond the classified materials and the mathematics of radar absorption, the true triumph of the stealth bomber was psychological. It forced adversaries to confront a terrifying possibility, that their most advanced defenses could be bypassed without warning. It reshaped strategic calculations not through spectacle, but through uncertainty. In military planning, uncertainty is power. The mere existence of an aircraft capable of penetrating the most fortified airspace on Earth altered doctrines, budgets, and long-term defense strategies. It compelled rivals to invest billions trying to counter something they could barely detect. That alone marked the expedition as a profound success, not only in operational terms, but in strategic influence. Ultimately, the stealth bomber symbolized a shift in the nature of dominance itself. Victory was no longer measured solely by explosive force or visible superiority, but by the ability to move unseen, strike precisely, and disappear without retaliation. It represented the culmination of vision, engineering courage, and strategic foresight. The mission was successful not merely because targets could be reached, but because the very concept of invulnerability was shattered. In redefining what was possible in modern warfare, the stealth bomber did more than shock the Kremlin. It rewrote the rules of the sky.